Hi, everybody. So welcome to our October Fire Safe Council meeting. So I think Amelia has first on the agenda to select the November-December meeting date. And so usually I believe that's a combined meeting. Pat, do you remember what the usual pattern has been for the November-December meeting?
The last 2 years, it's either been the second meeting in the second week in November or the second week in December.
Okay. Do people have a preference for when we would do that? The third week is usually the holiday week. I think that's why we changed it around. So let's see, what do you guys think about the second week in December?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Carol, that would be the 9th of December.
So we will be back on the 8th.
But we'll be back to Sacramento on the 8th, and sometime on the 9th we'll get home, right?
Right.
Just
So, okay, hang on.
We don't keep it consistent to like Thursdays or even the 1 to 3 on Thursday. So if there's a different time, the November December meeting is a bit more flexible.
Well, I'm wondering about the third week in December, December 16th. That's before the holidays. So would that work for people if we just did December 16th?
There's a RAC meeting on Monday, but yeah, it's good.
Okay, right, there's a RAC meeting on the 13th. All right, well, why don't we say December 16th, Thursday, December 16th at 1 p.m. would be our next Fire Safe Council. And that would be the combined November and December meetings. Okay. All right, so do we have any additions or changes to the agenda?
You want to do intros, Carol?
Sure, why don't we do that? So I'm looking at my screen and the next person up is Dave Johnson. Why don't you introduce yourself and hand it off to somebody else? Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, I'm Dave Johnson, Forest Health Coordinator, and I'll pass it on to Dylan Sheedy.
Yeah, Dylan Sheedy, Forestry and Fuels Program Director at the Watershed Center. Go ahead, Tom March.
I'm Tom March, the Caltrans Landscape Specialist for District 2. I'll hand it off to Chris.
I'm Chris Gold, Forest Health Program Manager for the Trinity County RCD. Go ahead, Bethany.
I'm Bethany Llewellyn. I'm a Grizzly Corps member in the Forest Health Office at the RCD, and I'll pass to Amelia.
Amelia Flight, the Watershed Program Manager and Trinity County Fire Safe Coordinator. I'm going to pass to Mike Wilson.
Hi, Mike Wilson, California Fire Safe Council Northern Region Coordinator. And my gosh, I just lost all my names here. Marla?
Hi, I'm Marla Walters. I'm the Grants Manager at the Trinity County RCD. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I don't know who to pass off to next, but Amelia can probably tell us.
We'll go to Kent Collard.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kent Collard from the Bar 717 Ranch and also a member of the Pine Palm Fire Safe Council. And I'll pass off to Xander.
Hi, everyone. I'm Xander Winter, Forestry and Fuels Program Associate at the Watershed Center in Hayfork.
I'll pass it off to Pat. Did you go yet?
Nope. So Pat Frost from Trinity Center and on the collaborative, I guess. And I'll pass it on to Denise.
Hi, Pat, everybody. I am Denise Wesley, the GIS manager for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District.
Hey, Denise, how about if you pass it on to Tom McCubbins?
Okay, Tom, you're up.
Hi, everybody. This is Tom McCubbins. I am the CEQA coordinator and fire planner for the RCD of Tehama County. And I got, who's left? Kent?
Nope, we did Kent.
We did Kent. Well, whoever's next.
How about South Trinity? Okay. So I think you're muted. There you go, Southern Trinity.
Errol Meyer with the Southern Trinity Volunteer Fire Department, as well as the Southern Trinity Fire Safe Council Exploratory Group.
Okay, thanks, Daryl.
And I'll pass it on to whoever's left. But
I think that's everybody. Do we miss anybody?
Just
Oh, we
me.
missed Kelly.
Kelly Sheen, District Manager for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District. Did we get who was on the phone at 448-2486?
That's me, Yvonne.
Breaking up a lot.
I'm in.
Breaking up. We didn't catch any of that. I think that's everybody other than the call.
All right, so welcome everybody. Thanks for zooming in. So I don't think we have any presentations today. So unless we do, we'll move on to outreach and news. So I don't think we have any updates on the local area resource list. We did talk about this at the fire chiefs meeting, and the fire chiefs would like to update this list. So it was just brought up at the last meeting with the idea that they would ask for suggestions. So that's just, the process is just starting. At the last meeting, we did talk about how the cooperators briefings seem to have improved and to some extent lessened the need for the local area resource list. But I would say since then, it's been kind of up and down. My experience with the cooperators briefing, some of the incident management teams are great at communicating and asking for local input, and others are not. So it does seem to have some value to at least have a list available to them. So not much of an update other than I think we will proceed and compile that list and then present it to the Fire Chiefs Association and the Board of Supervisors for them to consider and adopt it and send it to the Forest Service. So does anybody else have any input on developing that list of local advisors for the incident management teams?
So just a quick question. So what will be the role of Trinity County OES?
So they review the list also.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Amelia or Kelly, do you want to talk about the evacuation route planning funding grant application to the California Fire Safe Council?
Yes, so this application is opening November 1st. So just a little bit of update. in my previous meeting, we just heard that the California Fire Safe Council coordination funding is going to be announced next week. So we're waiting to hear on that. But there's another opportunity, which is evacuation route planning funding. And so the RCD has already gone ahead and gotten the approval from the council, from the county, to be the applicant to apply for this funding. And so we anticipate applying for approximately $150,000 to work with the county OES to update the evacuation route planning policies, procedures, and overall guiding documents just to help with evacuations. It also will pay for signage to implement the plan. So that's what we're looking to do.
So there's no implementation money for actually adding evacuation routes, let's say, but it's for planning and for signage preliminarily, is that correct?
Well, designating evacuation routes, yes, but and signage on those routes. What do you mean by?
Well, in the CWPP, there are places where they suggested adding an evacuation route, like where there's only one way in. So there's not, let's say, there's not NEPA planning for actually adding that extra stretch of road or whatever.
You mean
no,
building a new road?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of, no. And that wouldn't fit into the scope that the RCD is planning to go for.
Okay.
But
Great,
we can
thanks.
identify, in the plan, we can identify those areas and then work to get funding to do that planning.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. I see a new attendee, Cindy Ray. We went around and introduced ourselves. Do you want to introduce yourself perhaps?
Jill Cox has also joined us.
So Jill, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Jill Cox, Trinity County Board of Supervisors.
Welcome, thank you. You can always put your introductory information in the chat box if you're having trouble with the video or something like that, audio. Yeah, I know some of our bandwidths are really low. Okay, so the next thing under outreach and news was kind of a report on the development of a Southern Trinity Fire Safe Council. So I'm wondering if Amelia and Daryl want to kind of give us an update on where we're at with that.
Sure, I'll start. First of all, I would like to thank Carol and Amelia for coming over to Van Dusen last week. We had a meeting fairly well attended. We are still in the preliminary stages, exploratory, I guess, as to what type of format we want to use to form the council. And we're at this point. Amelia, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, so currently the Southern Trinity Fire Safe Council is working on identifying how they would like to form and in what capacity. At this point in time, we know that they are going to be participating regularly in these meetings and that they're going to work with us on future funding opportunities and that kind of stuff. So they're going to be working on their goals, objectives, and what projects they would like to see done. And then they're going to bring that back to the council to present to us as a whole so that we all can see how we can help facilitate and meet their needs and help them meet their goals. So with that in mind, we are going to work on updating the Southern Trinity Community Wildfire Protection Plan section. We're just waiting for the CAL FIRE funds to get that rolling at this point in time.
Yeah, I want to thank Daryl for hosting the meeting. It was good to meet the folks down there and kind of brainstorm what's the best way to get the kind of things done that they want to do. Amelia and I had some suggestions, like she said, on things we can do right now to start providing information to them, or getting things in the hopper that they're interested in doing, while they're continuing to work on how they want to formally set it up, or informally, whatever suits them the best. And then we'll just keep moving forward on kind of however we can integrate with that, whatever they choose to do with what the Countywide Fire Safe Council does. So it was good to see a bunch of people down there, and we're glad to go back. I'm glad to go back anytime. So anybody have any questions kind of on what we're trying to do with that, kind of get something going in that part of the county? Okay. So then the next thing is, at the last meeting, we talked about the BRIC funding. We had some discussion a month or so ago about potential how to use that FEMA funding, whether it would be a pilot project for home hardening, or whether it would be more fuel reduction projects. We were going to kind of put on our thinking caps. I haven't been able to follow up on it anymore, but I think the next funding application is in the spring, perhaps March. And so we do want to think about how we can propose a project. So Amelia, do you have anything else you want to add on that BRIC funding?
Just that it will be contingent on having the Trinity County Hazard Mitigation Plan in active status, so that and accepted by FEMA, so that other organizations are eligible to apply for this funding. I did recently attend a hazard mitigation planning session. It was geared towards tribal entities, but it was really good to see their projects and also just hear from FEMA as to building plans and how they want to work on implementing these plans. They did showcase a couple BRIC projects that were based on mining reclamation, but it was good to see. So moving forward, Carol and I will be working to pull together this BRIC funding proposal, and we hope that everything will be set when we're ready to propose.
So Amelia, as far as the hazard mitigation plan, where we were going to get like a short-term update or approval by the state OES and then work on a longer-term update. Am I remembering that correctly?
That is the county's plan, yes. So they had a stakeholders meeting last week to review the current quick update to the hazard mitigation plan. And then I believe they're trying to get it approved by December.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Okay, so so not much of an update there. Does anybody have any thoughts about kind of potential projects? I guess if you do, just email Amelia or I, and we'll kind of work on that.
I just wanted to mention, to at least to my knowledge, in order to do the home hardening, which I think would be a great idea, like a pilot community home hardening project. At least from my reading of it, defensible space has to be in place first in order for those houses to be eligible for home hardening, because you don't harden homes and not have defensible space. And so I think I can work with Amelia too, and you to. I think we'd want to do it in an area where we already have either defensible spaces already present, or there's funding to put that defensible space in place, or a potential combination. But it's just something to keep in mind.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So Amelia, do you want to lead the discussions on planning for the future?
I'm going to kick it off, but I'll let people go around. So we have a couple different topics today. And I really just wanted to bring this group back together. It seems like we've been doing a lot of project updates and we haven't been doing a lot of group thinking lately. And so I wanted to put a couple different topics up there that have been bouncing around between some of us in private conversations and kind of bring them up to the full group so that we can move forward. And so the first topic today is recovering from wildfire. And so if some of us want to share, what different areas are still struggling with, so what Southern Trinity is struggling with, what, we've seen the flooding and the slides in Coffee Creek now, and just what are some of our takes about how we have been addressing wildfires and what we may need to change in the future to try and help communities recover faster, or how can we work together as a group to prevent secondary disasters. So I'll open the floor with that.
So Amelia, I really appreciate your thinking here. In fact, I just had a conversation with the Forest Service yesterday about the same kind of recalibration or restart for the Trinity County Collaborative, because we've gotten into the same pattern of mostly just giving reports to each other and not really thinking about priorities or how we need to proceed in the future. So thanks for doing this.
So Dylan, your projects were affected a lot by the August fire. So, do you want to talk a little bit about how you've kind of shifted your priorities and maybe where the Watershed Center is rethinking, kind of how to move on?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's quite a bit to discuss here. Start with, we've experienced, 2 tough years, August Complex in 2020, and then McFarland and the Monument Fire. A lot of our funding projects that were funded through our Forest Health Grant from CAL FIRE, about 70 to 80% of them in the last 2 years have been burned up. So we're in the process of trying to rethink, how we can spend this money to make an impact. And I think it leads into the bigger conversation about how we plan for these disturbances. I was hoping the Forest Service might be here today. It doesn't look like they are, but we're in the past and in the present right now, we're very kind of reactive to the post-fire landscape. We often try to target specific sites, streamline planning by, targeting roadsides, plantations, or like high severity areas. And what the streaming process doesn't account for is managing fuel loading kind of across the landscape, and how do we kind of build on the work that the fire did. A lot of the times there's some good fire effects that happen. And sometimes, there are some bad effects where you have large areas of mortality, such as in Mad River and the August Complex. So, I think, the Forest Service Shasta-T, with their kind of integrated approach to the August Complex Phase 1 and 2 is a step in the right direction. Maybe the location and the size of it didn't quite hit the mark, just being away from the communities or other infrastructure. But, designing projects that build on fire disturbances and planning for these fire disturbances, I think we need to go bigger with our planning efforts. And that takes a second to kind of step back. It takes a large planning effort. But if we try to plan projects that are 30, 40,000 acres, not 10 5 to 10,000 acres, you know, I think we can accommodate for fire on the landscape when it inevitably happens. So, you know, that's the NEPA process is not very, it's hard to streamline any kind of NEPA process. And we've seen the kind of results of that this year, over the last year, with their you know, response to the August complex. And, you know, myself, with the funding I have from CAL FIRE, I'm trying to think about how we can manage the fuels in the post-burn environment so that they don't become a problem 5-10 years from now and just continue the same cycle. And so our thought is to go as mechanized as possible. CAL FIRE is going to loan us, we're in conversation with them about getting an air curtain burner for the county, and, you know, using machinery, skidders, excavators, you know, skid steers with grapple rakes, masticators, to get the wood out of the units, and either, because the reality is the biomass market is not really available to us, and it's an issue. And so we have to figure out other ways to kind of deal with these, you know, large areas that have, you know, dead and down fuel, and also manage the areas that are still green, and you know, use prescribed fire in some of these areas, like the August Complex Phase 2 project, where they're proposing fuel management zones, and they're going to box in these big areas, and then they're going to use prescribed fire. Is great, but how do we do that at a scale that is meaningful to our communities? Is a tough question that I think a lot of us, you know, forest managers and implementators are trying to figure out. And you know, I think it requires us to step back, the Forest Service and our project planning efforts on private land, and relook at things, and maybe spend some more time on planning, but on a bigger area, so that we can respond and not be so, we can be proactive and not reactive. And I think that's kind of the main point that I would like to make. And, you know, we're trying to figure that out with the money that we have. We have $3 million, and a lot of our projects are no longer in existence, but we still want to treat those areas. But we can't do that without NEPA compliance. And so it gets difficult. And the bigger conversation about, you know, treating untreated landscapes, absentee landowners, how do we engage with people? How do we, you know, increase our pace and scale with a straining workforce in California? I mean, the workforce capacity in California is not doing well. You know, our own crews can hardly even keep up with the work that we have, and we don't really have many contract crews to use. So it's a challenge, but I think it requires this group to kind of initiate some of those conversations with the Forest Service, and try to, I think, plan bigger and plan for wildfire, and use it to our advantage when we can.
So one thing I'm wondering is, you know, I appreciated the video that was posted on the Fire Safe Council Facebook page that showed how certain fuels treatments helped during the fight in the Caldor fire. Do we have instances in Trinity County where fuel treatments had some effect, and would it be helpful to kind of compile that information? Like, you know, we talked about maybe ridge tops aren't the thing to do. If you've got, you know, a wind event, or, you know, a ridge top fuel break may not be as helpful, but maybe, you know, roads or something else. So I'm just wondering if there's lessons learned that we can kind of summarize.
Yeah, we do have a lot of great examples, and Watershed Center, it's kind of extracurricular for me. I don't have funding for it, but I am working with the Forest Service, and I'll work with the RCD too to compile all the treatments that we did. I think one of the better examples from this year is the Hayfork South, the Kellogg Fuel Management Zone, the north of Hayfork. You know, that was a 600-foot buffer off of private property at the north of town there. And they were successful in holding it out of residential areas in Hayfork. And I think that's a place we want to go look at. And that was just a shaded fuel break, a large buffer, a strategic area where they could fire off of private property and hold the fire out of residential areas. And so we are working on that. Nick has asked me to put together something like the Caldor fire video. So we're working towards that. And I hope that we'll have maybe some examples of that in the next couple months, and, use those, the Oregon fire 2008, there was an example there where it ran into the prescribed burn treatment that we had done the year before and basically put itself out. And so I do think there's a lot of those examples that we can pull from.
So Pat, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I want to kind of riff off of the increasing the pace and scale in a different vein. I think certainly when everybody talks about increasing pace and scale, we're usually talking about number of acres per year getting done. And I think, and Dylan talked about this, the struggle is the NEPA, which we only have so much control at this point over the NEPA process, but with, I think, increasing the pace and scale of the third party NEPA teams, like the Watershed Center's efforts up on the Bowerman Ridge project, we've got to somehow build greater trust. And we've got a great with the Forest Service, and we've got a great opportunity because we have essentially a new set of Forest Service leaders. I mean, Chris Losey's been there a couple of years at the most. Tara's been there less than a year. The Forest Supervisor has been there a few months. And I think we've got to somehow increase the pace and scale of that third party effort. And then on another vein, all the great NEPA in the world won't get us anywhere if the projects continue to get litigated. And so increasing the pace and scale of our outreach to the communities that are still resisting the kind of work that we know needs to get done. I mean, after the fires that essentially turned San Francisco noontime into midnight skies, should have been the opportunity to begin to really reach out to those urban communities that don't understand these issues. And somehow I think our Fire Safe Council, we need to, this is more for for Mike, we need to somehow, I think one of the roles of the regional coordinators in the California Fire Safe Council is to be that voice. But we as the local Fire Safe Councils are going to be the ones that are going to have to motivate the state agent organization to do that work. So those are, there are different angles of increasing pace and scale, but until we have greater community buy-in for the kind of work we want to do, 50,000 acres of NEPA is only going to get us 50,000 acres of NEPA litigation.
I agree with you, Pat, and thank you, duly noted, for the California Fire Safe Council.
Okay, so it's good to hear that the Watershed Center is kind of trying to work on something that describes projects that work. I think maybe the Fire Safe Council needs to look out for funding that would let us summarize for the county as a whole what worked and what didn't work. I mean, just so we can really figure out what kind of projects we really want to focus on in the future. And I see Keith, you have your hand up. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to unmute myself, but Dylan moved into my spot on the screen. So thank you, Dylan, for really you shared a lot more than I knew you had on your mind, and it was very helpful. I agree that and Pat as well, the pace and scale is important to us. We just had some revisiting of effective treatments and the somewhat, there's always going to be a concern if we measure the effectiveness against last year's conditions. I think with the drought that we've had, the fuel conditions were such that I'm going to say it almost didn't matter who you were as far as an ownership and your management practices, everybody got burned pretty bad. So whether it's the Dixie Fire or here, things, I heard too many firefighters tell me, boy, I've never seen it do that before. So I think our ridge tops are important. I think that our roads are important. I think we've recognized that all of those things need to be considered, including the, like Dylan said, I think we need a bigger scale plan that addresses and has more elements that contribute to a modification of fuel types. Because, you know, you can, if you listen to the wrong people, they'll tell you don't do anything. And I think that we need to consider, you know, the fuel type, the topography, the arrangement of fuels, how long it's been there. We just had a fire, like Dylan said. How are we going to address that? Or maybe it won't burn very hot tomorrow or next year, but what's it going to do over time? And I think we want to contribute to a longer term plan for what do we want the fuels to look like, because we have a pretty good idea what they're going to become if we do nothing.
So I'm hearing, I mean, from a landscape scale, particularly on Forest Service lands, you know, we need to think about how to get those modifications of the fuel types done. And then from Dylan, I'm hearing that, and Chris, you know, we need to maybe do some more strategic thinking about communities, the buffers around the communities. So if the fires move out of the wilderness or the forest, you know, how do we protect the communities? So it seems like it's both, you know, this, you know, near in around communities, what do we need to be doing? And then on the larger landscape, you know, how do we address the areas that are already burned? Plus, how do we modify fuels where the areas haven't burned to kind of better be able to, you know, direct the fire? Is that a decent summary, maybe?
It is to me, in that I think for Sierra Pacific, we have control of our own property. And so we have a landscape plan that considers who our neighbors are, whether that's a community or whether it's a wilderness. And we feel like we have risk, as the communities will feel, based upon, you know, proximity and topography. So yeah, I think we'll develop a plan, but it still needs to be coordinated. I talked to Tim Ritchie this morning. I think they're out doing some pile burning. Maybe that's why he's not there, but we want to get together with them and again, make sure that we're focusing on the same things. And I think there's places that we've missed. Maybe these are places that Dylan's already thought of, which were more in that, not just the interface, but on the elevational scale, where some of the vegetation types would fare really well to a prescribed fire regime. It might still require some treatments to go with it, but I think we need to do things bigger and better. And we do have to sell people on even small successes. I wish we didn't have to do 100-acre prescribed fires, but that's probably what it's going to take before people feel comfortable. We still get calls when we're burning one pile next to Lewiston. People get nervous still.
Right. I will say, just from the absentee landowner perspective, that's an issue in Trinity Center when we were looking at the river complex coming this way and who had defensible space. People who live here got the incentive and pretty active in working on their defensible space. But many of the homes have absentee landowners, or the lots in between the homes have absentee landowners. So there was a lot of discussion at the community meetings about how to address that issue. And so Pat, great institutional memory that he has, remembered that in, was it 2006? The county adopted a vegetation ordinance that lets people both tag on to the CAL FIRE's 4291 program, where you have to have dispensable space around a house. And it also covers empty lots and is a code enforcement kind of thing. So I think our CSD is pursuing that with the Board of Supervisors to see if that can figure out a way that that vegetation ordinance can be enforced, reviewed, whatever, implemented, so that we can deal with some of these issues with absentee landowners. So I just give you that update. Do you have anything to add, Pat? Let me turn on the conversation radio.
Just that trying to set up a meeting with Richard Coons and Keith Groves. Keith, because he's our supervisor in the North Lake area, for the week of the 8th to talk about it, and to talk about maybe starting a pilot project in Trinity Center to see how it goes. The real rubber meets the road is there funding? Does the county have adequate funding to pay code enforcement people to enforce this ordinance on any kind of scale? Because currently most of the code enforcement is focused on illegal cannabis issues, and it's funded by the cannabis licensing fees and that sort of thing. So that's a big unknown. But Trinity Center makes a nice discrete, kind of community geography that we could try it in. And it was 2006 that it was adopted. And then again in 2013, it was essentially, I would say, ratified, because the author of the safety element at that time included it as a county policy to enforce that ordinance.
I feel like CAL FIRE should be enlisted to help with that. I mean, I know in other communities, I mean, they're handing out fines to people in my hometown that don't have defensible space. And not that we want to be fining people, but we need to encourage and force their hand to do their defensible space. And CAL FIRE looks at it like it's the landowner's responsibility. So, I think discussion with the CAL FIRE unit about bringing more enforcement into the area and doing more inspections. I don't know how many defensible space inspections they do a year up here, but I don't imagine it's very much.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I mean, our experience has been that when they have the staff available, they come up and do the inspections and tag the homes, but then they don't follow up, so nothing gets done. And that's a staffing issue from them. So maybe we can just figure out a way to help them with that. So Amelia, you have a comment?
Yes. So why we brought this up is looking at, and Pat, if you could please include me when you meet with Richard Coons and Keith, that would be great, is because from the RCD and the watershed perspective, it's really hard for us to treat consistent landscapes when we have landowners that either aren't cooperative, which is like, we can't do anything about that, but then landowners that are absentee. And so we may be treating 6 other houses in a row, and then we hit a lot and we can't get a hold of the owner, and it's overstocked and there's nothing on it except for overstocked fuels. There's no house or anything. And then it goes back to other residences that are managing their landscape, and it becomes really hard to build that defensible space if you have these intermixed parcels that are heavily stocked. And so from my perspective, I was looking at it as, how can the RCD and Watershed Center work to use the funds that we have in the project areas that we already have money and address these absentee landowners. And so with that, the ordinance, maybe there can be some revision in it. That how I was looking at it is that the RCD and the Watershed Center can take the ownership of the notification. We send letters all the time, but to notify that in the legal respect that, your land is a hazard. And if you continue to ignore this, like, the RCD and the Watershed Center could move forward with treating it free of cost to you. We're not asking to further burden the communities and put fines or liens on people's properties. But for the people that are here, we need to look at how do we address this in a broader scale for the people that are here every day and here during wildfires. And so if there was a way to modify that ordinance or add into it that when the RCD and the Watershed Center have funds in a project area and we have an absentee landowner, that if we go through appropriate notification chains and still receive nothing, that we can proceed and we can treat that landscape to help the neighbors around them.
So maybe it would be helpful when we get done with this, Amelia, I'll send you the ordinance that you can distribute to the Fire Safe Council folks, because it has in it, the process is, the county code enforcement person, because I'm sure the RCD and the Watershed Center don't want to begin to look like they're cops and doing enforcement. But the code enforcement officer sends a notice to the landowner that their property is delinquent and needs to be treated. And it further then says, and if you got X number of days to kind of respond and do treatment, and if you don't, the county will hire, somebody to do the work, and then we will put a lien on your property to get reimbursed. So, and being able to insert the ability to get the work done and not have to put a lien on somebody's property, might help also, if the RCD or the Watershed Center actually have funding. But, with going down that path of legal remedies does put the implementers of defensible space at a little bit of risk of litigation also. So, I mean, that's just something, but I'll send Amelia the ordinance and then she can distribute it and people can kind of digest it and see what they think of it. I mean, it's now 15 years old. So it probably needs some updating and that sort of thing too. But, it's a fine line, this, balancing, the greater good needs of the community versus the property rights of the individual landowners.
And sometimes, it's good to have both a carrot and a stick, but sometimes, from our experience, we have some landowners where we've written them, the fire department has written them letters and the community service district wrote them letters saying, you're a hazard to your neighbors. And then we followed that up with the RCD grant saying we'll come in and clean up your defensible space, and they don't even respond. So I guess those are just the hardcore cases. Hopefully everybody else would be a lot more amenable to free work. Jill, your hand was up for a while. Were you wanting to say something?
I can probably ask my question offline. It just was more, Dylan was mentioning that communicating with the Forest Service in fear of litigation was an issue with, I see you guys as, exactly what it is that you need to do. You can find the funding to do it. You might be lacking workers, as you stated, but you've got those, on board for at least certain sizes of project. But it was the fear of the litigation for your NEPA projects. And the last conversation that I had within the month with Rachel Berkey, I brought this up to her, and the conversation was a little bit broader than that. But her statement to me was, I don't fear the litigation, bring it. And so her lawyer, the fact that she's a lawyer, I'm looking for how's that going to help us. And I just was wondering if, I'm just hopeful that it is. Dylan, do you feel like that? What do you think about that? I'd like to see that work for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beneficial to have someone like that in that position, but the reality is special interest groups can litigate and appeal and hold these projects up for 3, 4, sometimes 10 years, and then the project either burns or the project never gets done, or the people that have been working on it move on, because you can imagine how frustrating that is. So I don't, I think you want to design projects that don't get litigated, which is difficult, and it requires quite a bit of outreach. We kind of have the same players in the county every time. It's, you know, Denise Boggs, and it's some of these Epic, and it's these same interest groups every single time that they know how to play the game and they know how to hold things up, and they're going to do everything they can to do that. And I don't think having a lawyer as your forest supervisor is going to change that. I think they can still use their leverage to, you know, hold up projects and make the process as frustrating as possible for everyone that's truly trying to do something that, you know, they feel like and is, you know, is good for the forest and is what's needed. You know, it's a bigger problem than that, I think. And I don't think, you know, I saw that the August Complex Phase 2 got like some emergency authorization so that they could move forward with the project without having to deal with appeals or anything. So not that the project can't get litigated, but they can start work now and they can go to work. And so that's an important, I think, mechanism to use for some of these NEPA projects is get that emergency use authorization or whatever it's called. I can't really remember, but allow the Forest Service to go to work now. And you know, if it gets litigated, it gets litigated, but at least we're starting and getting the work done and dealing with that stuff on the back end.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
And I would say, so related to that is, I think the Fire Safe Council, you know, as we come up with priority projects and things like that, need to remember that one of the advantages of the Trinity County Collaborative and on a more local scale, the Weaverville Community Forest Steering Committee, is that thus far, none of the projects that have been supported by either of those groups has ever gone to litigation because of the collaborative nature of those efforts. And so I think we need, you know, and that goes back to my, you know, we need to recalibrate how the collaborative is operating instead of just being agencies reporting to each other on what they've done or what they haven't done. We need to really get back to the mission of the collaborative, which is helping the Forest Service design projects and then providing them the cover and the support to get those projects through without litigation. So I think that's an important thing that, you know, we need to not lose sight of.
Absolutely, Pat.
So I'm trying to, you know, figure out some takeaways, you know, some specific things we can do. I mean, this is a good starting point, but so I'm thinking Pat and Amelia are going to follow up with Richard Coons on the, you know, how to implement the vegetation management ordinance, or at least, you know, update it, figure out how useful it can be or not. I see that one thing the Fire Safe Council might do is write a letter to CAL FIRE asking them to step up their implementation of the 4291 inspections in Trinity County. What do you guys think about that as a small step? A piece of implementation. Wouldn't hurt.
How about if I can contribute? I'd be a little bit, I'm a little concerned about CAL FIRE's involvement. Not that they aren't helpful, but the Board of Forestry with CAL FIRE's help has promoted some defensible guidelines, vegetation management standards that can make things very difficult for us in our county. I'm more concerned about what they're trying to do is set something up that instead of it being a minimum standard, it's a standard at which they feel is going to be adequate for them to defend the property. And some properties are in a bad spot. They're not even defensible. So we need to focus on the ones that are and focus on the new ones and work on a strategy to protect those communities maybe as a whole rather than individual lots and have, you know, this driveway is not wide enough. This one's got to be better. I think we can, everybody's got to protect their own to some degree, but I think we have to work better as a big whole. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just think that what we've taken on as a strategy too would just be one where we decided we can't manage the Forest Service, we can't manage the wilderness, but we have some things we can do, even if it leaves a hole in the defense. It doesn't take as long to plug that hole as if the whole thing is, the whole fence is down. So we want to build the fences until we're done. When we get caught up, then I think I can look at my neighbor and prod them. But right now I got a lot of places we need to plug the fence.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that comment because one of our residents was actually trying to take the CAL FIRE guidelines on defensible space and apply it to his lot. And he realized he'd have to take out everything except maybe 2 trees, in order to get the spacing and all that stuff. And he's like, I just can't do that. I mean, and it was on a big lot. So, but when you looked at all the distances from his house to the lot line, all that stuff, I mean, it was like he was going to have 2 trees left. So yeah, I get that. So
Carol, can I ask about a comment that was just brought up with Jill, Dylan, and Pat, which is if Denise Boggs, I don't know her, but I know her name, and Epic are the ones who are in opposition to the project being proposed, is there, and the collaborative has clout, I think the Watershed Center has clout, RCD has credibility as well. Is there any way we can, elicit the support of, reach out to those folks through, I know some people you can't negotiate with very well, but I mean, send Bob Morris over there to talk to her or something. I don't know who it would take, but somebody around here has some similar thinking, which might have a little bit of reasonableness to go with it.
I mean, kind of, Keith, that's kind of what happens project by project. Bob Morris, Larry Glass, and Joseph Bauer in particular, and Arnold maybe sometimes, are the ones that will be the emissaries from the collaborative to Epic in particular, and to the Conservation Congress, which is Denise Boggs. And, Denise may still write her letters saying what she doesn't like about the projects, during scoping, but thus far she has laid off of formal litigation. Now, if we start proposing 50,000 acre projects, that'd be a heavier lift for those guys to do. But that's kind of how it is operated, in an informal kind of way.
Okay, because I could see the collaborative providing that kind of support, because we only meet, monthly or quarterly, and the RCD and the Watershed Center, they're on the ground doing something every day. And not that the collaborative doesn't do things, but they're more of a policy type group, I think, and they can have a major influence, I think, on support or encouragement of particular projects to get some of them actually going on the ground. And I just think that the collaborative has a place and a play, and I don't want to see it wasted. And I'm not saying you're wasting it. I just don't want it to go on the wrong ears.
Yeah, I understand.
okay, so Xander, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to touch on that a little bit, I want to first raise the distinction between private land treatments and federal land treatments. The Cal VTP program that the Board of Forestry helped form is currently being litigated, and yet projects can still happen under that program EIR. And so I think that could be a really valuable vehicle to get large projects done on the private lands that we're working on developing one for the Weaver Basin area, but it's still sort of a new process to CAL FIRE, who's the lead agency. So there's a little bit of growing pain there, it seems like. But they reached out and offered their environmental consultants help in getting that together. So that I think is going to be a good demonstrator, and we'll see how that process works, and hopefully be able to cookie cutter those types of treatments around different communities, you know, in addition to Weaver Basin. And then for the federal lands, I don't think fear of litigation is a great excuse to not try, in my opinion. I have to be, you know, optimistic about that kind of a thing. But with everything fresh in the collective memory, with the past horrendous fire seasons, I think there's not as strong a case to be made by those litigant groups. And this ties in with the outreach that Pat mentioned too. You know, it seems like it would be kind of working against those groups' interest of keeping their donor lists as full as they'd like if they started to try and intervene in some of these projects that, you know, the vast majority of people, especially locals, think need to get done and need to get done soon. And so I think, you know, again, I try to stay optimistic, and the Bowerman Ridge project is going to be another new demonstrator for the new category 25 CE. And so we're going to put that through and see what happens with it. But I think I at least hope that, you know, the tide may be changing in the people's acceptance of litigation against these projects.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So I'm thinking, you know, it's a little after 2, so we might want to start wrapping up this discussion. My last thought is to follow up with Keith that, you know, we need a strategy to protect communities as a whole. We should probably just keep that in mind as we're thinking about implementing the CWPP, because that's kind of what it was intended to do. And, you know, maybe it didn't have a broad enough application, but that might be one way to start wrapping our arms around this. And so, Amelia, do you want to follow up with anything to wrap this up?
Yes, just briefly. So in the next month or so, Denise and I will be reaching out to everybody to look at the projects that have been completed within the last year. So we are receiving funding that is going with an annual CWPP like monitoring report to see what projects have been done, what projects were burned over, what we look at moving forward. So just be on the lookout that we're going to be looking to collect that data, and hopefully that will help direct some of our conversation as well next year.
Okay, so think about how we can implement this larger vision, specific things that we can do, I mean, as a fire safe council. Any other comments before we move on to project updates, maybe? Any other thoughts?
Hey, Carol, it's Dave Hottomio. Could you hear me?
Yeah, hey, Dave, go ahead.
Hey, sorry I cut out earlier, but I've been listening in, and I think that this conversation, it's really, it's an important time to have this conversation. In particular, just with the funding that's coming through and the desire to get landscape scale treatments happening rather than shotgunning an acre here, 2 acres here, 3 acres there, more to have landscape scale treatments. So, I mean, it's a really important time to actually be having this conversation. So I'm happy that it's happening right now.
Yeah, more strategic projects.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dave. Glad to know you're here.
Yep.
All right, so project updates. I don't think we have anybody from BLM. But Now we know we have Dave from CAL FIRE. What's CAL FIRE up to, project wise?
Actually, we're just finally got the VTP was mentioned. We just, we had a couple little issues with that. It's really just word selection. I mean, some of it's, I know it's getting litigated, so it's just like our lawyers are really looking at it close. So it's really our word selection. So I just sent that back up the chain for the Big Creek VTP. I'm not sure it's the best tool for everywhere. Honestly, that project I think is a notice of exemption. I think most of our projects that we do, including the Weaver Basin, should just be a notice of exemption, categorical exemption. But yeah, so we'll have our first one moving forward. We have another one that we're working on in Shasta County, VTP. We're going to be moving that one forward probably this next week as well. Now that we have our verbiage all down, I think it's going to go through just fine. So anyhow, that's the one project that I've been working on for Trinity County. It's been a little bit of a headache because it was originally a VMP, then I was doing a mitigated neg deck, and then I was like, well, I guess I'll just do the VTP. And so just to say we did it, and so that thing's off my plate and in review now. So hopefully we get that back fairly soon, and we'll have a good example for the Washington Center to use. I know they've been looking for that as well, but honestly, I think the more we could use notice of exemption, probably the better.
Okay, and as of Monday, the burn ban, CAL FIRE lifted the burn ban for Eastern Trinity County, provided you have a air quality management permit, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Monday morning, I think it was 8 o'clock in the morning, something like that. I think people were probably just burning over the weekend in the good weather, but I don't think anybody got in trouble for it. So.
Okay. Anything else from CAL FIRE that you want to let us know?
I will.
Okay. So Tom March from Caltrans, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Don't have any projects as of yet. The state is trying to come up with a pilot project for funding, but it would be for state lands with a CE with no major assets, environmental assets. So it's just pilot project. So we're trying to figure out how it's going to work. And with Trinity County being so a lot extensive with forest, U.S. forest, it's going to be complicated. But there are some state lands up there towards Trinity Center that I'm looking at, and maybe do some partnership and see. But the state needs to fine tune their scope of work first. So nothing really beyond that. Maintenance is going forward. Now that we got some rains, we're going to get some trees down, the dead trees off the roadways. And but Dave, maybe you can answer this. I know that the inmates have been, obviously they're still working on erosion control and post fire, but Trinity inmate crews are still, limited. What's the percentage of crews that they have out there?
I'm really not the best person to speak to all that. I know that it's not a lot, so I really couldn't. I don't feel comfortable, really, honestly. Even okay. I don't want to give you the wrong numbers.
No,
all I know is there's not a lot of people. It sounds like anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and that's
crews are extremely limited. Yeah,
that's one of our complications. So hopefully with the headquarters new agenda, we can contract it. But like you said, there's the limited workforce as well. So I'll keep you posted when we're able to get this scope of work contract available and then go forward. That's all we got right now.
So Tom, what kind of pilot project do you have in mind? Is it like a roadside shaded fuel break or something like that?
Yeah, just a fuel break. Obviously, one side of the district is different than the other. Working with community, try to figure out how much we can spend and acres for dollars per acre, and see where that'll take us, and see what would work best. And trying to do. There's a big push for the clear recovery. My biggest challenge is the balance between fire safety and roadway safety, and especially winter weather, try to get some sun on the road. And that's kind of contradictory to, we don't want sun on the brush and have vigorous growth. But we also want to make sure that the trees are out of the way so the car doesn't wrap itself around on impact, those types of things. So yeah, shaded fuel breaks, thinning, tree removal off the roadway is what we're looking at.
So on Highway 3, I'm wondering if that would either overlap the Watershed Center's Bowerman Ridge and work with PUD and Sierra Pacific, or the RCD's work where on the CAL FIRE grant, they're applying to do work along Highway 3. Do either of those projects potentially need to interact with Tom? Dylan or Chris?
Yeah, this is Chris here. I think, once we get funding, we'll potentially reach out for some traffic control for some of the roadside stuff that's right along the highway. And we talked, this was a while back, this project's been taking forever, but they, about, some of the availability of that traffic control. And it sounded like it wasn't really gonna be an issue for some of the stuff the bigger stuff that could potentially impact the highway right in that Guy Covington area.
But beyond traffic control, I mean, are you talking about the same land along Highway 3?
I believe so, yeah. Some of it's the ownership got a little weird with that whole area, because some of it's forest, some of it is potentially Bureau of Reclamation, and some of it's state land. So
right. So I think you guys need to be coordinating on ownership, so that the CAL FIRE grant isn't talking about the same land parcels that Caltrans is thinking about doing some work on. And same thing, the PUD, where their power line parallels the road. I don't know if they're talking about under the Bowerman Ridge project doing work along the PUD lines. They were at one point, right?
So funding is going to be a while, next fiscal year. Chris, I'll send you a message. Give me a call, and we can, get the conversation started about what my thoughts are and what you have going on, and try to have a long-term goal out there on 3. Does that sound good?
yeah, that sounds great. And I can email you the map and stuff for what we currently are thinking. So
great, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to coordinate with Tom too. And most of those power lines, aren't they underground around Bowerman Ridge, or am I mistaken?
The ones that come under the lake and then down Bowerman Ridge, those are mostly underground, but it just depends what areas you're going to pick up, if some of those would be the power line along the road.
I don't know that I'll follow up with Tom, March, me and Xander, if I can get his contact info. We can figure out what's going on there, but there's not a ton of treatment. There is some roadside work going on, but it's not huge.
Okay, I just want to make sure we don't have 3 different people all trying to do fuel breaks along Highway 3.
Yeah, I think, Tom, it would be good to get you connected with TPUD and just their WAPA plan, so that you are in the loop with their project areas and how it impacts your project area.
Right. Like I said, though, way out as Caltrans is, and so we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, because I don't know if you know, but the TPUD has a project, their WRAP, W-R-A-P.
Yep,
You
yep.
know, 300 feet on either side of the power lines. Okay, good, you know that. Okay. Okay, yeah, just trying to be efficient. You know, we got limited dollars, might as well not do the same thing. Kent, are you still on? You have any update for Hyam Palm Fire Safe Council?
Yeah, I'm still here, and I did want to update everyone. We're putting together a prescribed burn association in Hyam Palm, and so we are having a workshop for landowners and information session on, let's see, it'd be November 12th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Starting out here at the Bar 717 Ranch. Lania Quinn Davidson, the area fire advisor for UC Cooperative Extension, is going to come over and do a presentation on PBAs and how they work. And then hopefully Aaron and Miller, the fire management directors, will have that day open also. And they're going to come over and we're going to scout out some private property and just talk about how PBA would work, you know, on private properties here in Hyam Palm.
Cool. Pat, what's Will's last name that does all the prescribed fire down in Hoopa?
No, up in Mid Klamath, that's Will Harling.
Will Harling.
And
So,
everybody, I'm sure Dylan, everybody know Will, so.
yeah,
And Lenya knows him and works with him.
that's an excellent example of a neighborhood prescribed fire prescribed burn association that's been doing great work. Okay, anything else, Kent?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, I'm not seeing NRCS, and I'm not seeing Deb Harris from the Air Quality Management District. I will point out that Amelia put a update on the Trinity County Fire Safe Council Facebook page, social media, to remind people that, yeah, you can start burning your piles, but it shouldn't be some smoldering mass of wet stuff that puts out tons of smoke. Under the standards for your burn permit, it should be pretty dry and, you know, not smoking in the whole neighborhood. Keith, do you have anything for SPI?
Sure. I've already probably talked too much, but just to let you know that we're doing a post-fire assessment of all of the line work that was put in for all the fires we had this past year, and we've identified those that are considered priority lines, and they'll get some additional treatment to go along with the dozer work. We've got some roadside treatments that have taken place, and we're going to look to at least document those and maintain those. So I think we've enhanced some of the infrastructure, and you want to do pace and scale, just have a fire breathing down your neck and you get a lot done real quick. So we did a lot of work, I know, and we just don't want to lose it. And, you know, it gives you opportunities to think about, you know, if we want protection from our neighbors, sometimes we have to swallow hard too and think about how we can protect the neighbors to us. So we've got places out there that are too thick and have, you know, no fire treatment on the ground or in the canopy. And I think, Carol, you know of some of those, and we do. And some of them, if you have it in a plan, that's one thing, getting it done is another. So I think you'll see some more activity from us in a positive way that supports what we think is a compartmentalization to protect ourselves and and protect our operation. And the other would just be that next week, it looks like we're gonna keep getting rain off and on. So we'll probably start our burn program next week too. So when people see smoke, they don't think it's the August complex coming back to life. It won't be that. And I think that's pretty much for us. I'm enjoying working with the Watershed Center and the RCD. I'm thankful that those groups are I think that's what's going to help the Forest Service get some work done. If we didn't have them doing it, they'll just get rocks thrown at them. So I think we've got maybe a better formula going forward. Looking forward to that.
Well, yeah, I want to thank SPI for all the work that they did to protect Trinity Center. I mean, those, every time everyone would get nervous, I would say, look at the dozer lines that SPI put in. It'll be okay. So that was a lot of work, and it was greatly appreciated. And I'm wondering if it would be, Amelia can tell you this better, would it be worthwhile to incorporate those treatments and fire lines into the mapping that's in the CWPP update? Denise?
Yes, we can. Let me think about how that would incorporate, and I'll get back to you. But yes, we do want to document fire lines over time so that we can hand that off to management teams and that kind of stuff in the future.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's about the amount of work they did is equivalent to project level stuff. So anyway, okay. Thank you, Keith. Thanks a lot. I don't have, let's see, I see Tom McCubbin signed off for Tehama Glen Fire Safe Council. Trinity Center Volunteer Fire Department, we don't have any updates, except we're submitting some BRAC projects. Then Jill, do you have anything for Trinity County Board of Supervisors?
You know, I don't have any updates to share with you. I just want to take 30 seconds and say thank you to all of you. I get overwhelmed sitting here listening to such educated, hardworking, willing people who you know what to do, you know how to do it, you know how to fix what's out there and prevent the next disaster. And you just keep working tirelessly to overcome barriers to that. And I can't thank you enough. So just for whatever it's worth, I'm grateful for every one of you. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thanks for hanging in there. Pat, do you have an update for the collaborative?
The collaborative hasn't met since our last meeting. Our next collaborative meeting is the 19th of November. And it'll still probably be a Zoom meeting, so limited to a couple of hours. Really don't have an agenda yet. But if there's anything the Fire Safe Council wants me to get on the agenda, either for this meeting or future meetings, just let me know.
So can you take a minute and talk about the RAC in terms of potential projects and timing?
Well, the time is about run out. So if you're still working on your proposals, you've got until 11:59 on November 1st to get them emailed to LaJean Hammond with the Forest Service. Process-wise is next week, probably the second and third, all those proposals will be kind of collated and gotten out to the 15 RAC members. We have a RAC meeting scheduled for November 8th, thanks to Jill Cox. We're going to be meeting at the Board of Supervisors chambers in the library. That'll be a combination hybrid meeting. You can come live, but you got to wear a mask, that kind of thing, or you can join by Zoom. We'll get the Zoom link out here shortly. That meeting is not going to be an opportunity for project proponents to give their elevator spiel about why their project ought to get funded. It's going to be more about the RAC members looking at the proposals, organizing them, thinking through, priorities and things like that, and maybe floating out the kinds of questions that we'll have for the proponents. And then we have a meeting on the 15th of November, 4 till 7:30, like the November 8th meeting. And that's when we'll begin to hear proposal kind of pitches from whoever's submitted proposals and wants to give us their 2 cents worth. If we're not able to get all that work done by the close of the November 15th meeting, we'll meet again on December 13th and try to wrap up our recommendations. A couple of the kind of nuances that we've got to deal with is that we have 15 RAC members, and under the law, the RAC members are each a part of one of 3 groups, interest groups, A, B, or C. For us to meet and have discussions to have a quorum, we have to have 3 members from each of those 3 groups present. To approve anything, for us to vote up or down on anything, we have to have 3 votes in each of those 3 groups. So I'm really leaning on my RAC members to show up to the meeting, so we have all 15. If we have less than 5 in each of the 3 groups, we run the risk that if somebody is a RAC member and also a proponent for a project and feels that they have a conflict of interest, they can't vote. And if we whittle it down too much so that there aren't 3 votes in each of the groups, then we're stymied. So that's kind of a nuance, that we got to work through. Sounding like we're going to get, my prediction was 30 to 35 proposals. I'm thinking that was a little low. I think it's going to be 35 to 40 proposals. We have $1 million and $1,500,000 to allocate. The RAC members haven't really selected a prioritization like, we mostly want to fund X, Y, or Z, leaving it pretty open, being it's a kind of a new process with 13 of the 15 members being brand new to the RAC process. I think there'll be some very good projects all the way around. I think there also will be some pretty pointed questions from RAC members about, the efficacy of projects and that sort of thing. Enough?
Yeah, thanks. So if you have a fuel reduction project, as I learned on Monday, it doesn't need to be signed off by the district ranger, but it does need to be submitted. So that if you go to the Forest Service, the Shasta Trinity website, they have the RAC application form. If you have a project you want to submit, fill out the form and throw it in the hopper. Yeah, so it's fuel reduction projects, watershed protection, environmental education, a wide variety of things, but I would expect a chunk of money is going to go to fuel reduction projects out of this $1 million+ dollars. And potentially we would be getting more funding if the infrastructure bill passes.
Right. So currently in the congressional draft of the infrastructure bill, the roughly $1 trillion bill, there is a line item for funding or reauthorizing the RACs. I don't know if it's for 1 year or 2 years or what, but it probably be my guess. If it's 1 year, it'd be roughly around $400,000 that would come through as part of the next fiscal year.
Okay, guys, go for it. Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
So next up, I think, is Trinity County RCD. Chris or Dave, do you want to tell us what kind of projects you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, I can start us off here. So primarily we've been working on 2 projects. One was through the State Water Resource Control Board, and we basically completed implementation on that project on Steiner Flat Road for about 2.5 miles of shaded fuel break. It's limited distance. I think it's only 25 feet, 50 in some places on BLM land as well as private land. And then done around a quarter-mile on Steel Bridge Road as well. And then the crew has been working on a private parcel just north of Weaverville and completed about 20 acres so far out there. And we're planning on finishing that implementation up sometime next week. And then we're gonna move on to our fire prevention grant through CAL FIRE, working up on Leslie Lane and Fisher Price Lane, which are just west of Weaverville, just out of town on 299, doing defensible space driveways, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where what we've been up to and where we're headed for implementation. And then we've continued to plan for our forest health grant and collect some data and stuff for some of the stuff that will occur in the Weaverville Community Forest, primarily in the 2014 Oregon fire burn footprint, as well as the Lake Forest plantations, which is a big group of plantations on Forest Service land to figure out what's feasible for mastication and fuels reduction. And those are the two Forest Service areas of our CAL FIRE CCI Forest Health Grant. So a lot of planning for that, and then we've been able to actually get some meetings with the Forest Service as well as BLM upcoming to kind of finalize some of that and see what we're going to contract out, what's going to be handled with crews, what's going to be mastication, that type of stuff. So big projects take a fair amount of planning, but we're making good headway considering we just pretty recently got that grant. And that's I think that's about it for us. Only a few projects within our focus since we last met. So I guess Dave or Bethany can add anything if they need to. Should about cover it. Any questions, I guess?
Any questions for the RCD staff?
Hey, Chris, Keith Greenwood was wondering, are you guys doing any work up Little Browns Creek Road or Little Browns Road, whatever that one?
Yeah. So definitely a lot of that is in the Forest Health Grant, and we're meeting with the BLM next week to kind of get into that. We've been more focused on the Forest Service, and then our next grant that we have coming through, which is the fire prevention, also CCI money from CAL FIRE, is basically has that whole stretch of Little Browns Creek Road up into the private, and it goes through SPI. So there's definitely potential to be working with Keith on some of that stuff upcoming, but we haven't received a fully executed agreement on that one yet. So I haven't been spending much time on that. So, but definitely we will reach out to you, Keith, as we move forward with that one.
Okay, thanks. The question kind of started with Bob Morris. I think for the past week or so, he's heard professional sounding chainsaw work with, sounds like a lot of saws. And I was thinking it was maybe one of your crews. Are you guys working up above him to the north?
We are not. I would have him, he would probably want to reach out to BLM. I would guess the BLM has probably got some contract crews or something.
Okay, maybe that's what it is. Because right at 5 o'clock, when we thought we were getting close to where it was at, the saws stopped. So it's like, oh man, now I don't know where they're at. So yeah, maybe I'll check with Jennifer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. All right. That sounds like it for the RCD. I don't see PUD or Cooperative Extension or the Forest Service. Dylan, Xander, what's the Watershed Center doing?
Yeah, not too many new updates since we last talked. The forestry crews are still working on salvage projects. They're cruising and marking and getting that finalized, hoping that some of those will sell here soon. The fuels crews have been working up in the plantations above Hayfork doing PCT work. They've also been down in Junction City. Lewiston Road. We did a bunch of mastication up there for the BLM, and they're just kind of cleaning it up now, getting the stuff that the masticator couldn't get to. So we got a couple more days of work out there. And then when we get shut out with weather, we'll probably continue doing more work around Hay Fork until anticipating laying our crews off December 15th for the winter time. And then we'll pick them back up. Hopefully we have a good winter, but sometime later in February, March, the fuels crews will start up again. I'll let Xander, if he's still on this call, update everyone on the Bowerman Ridge project.
Yeah, so I think I'll be spending my next couple of weeks out in the Bowerman area. Again, we're working under the new Category 25 CE. So that gives us up to 2,800 acres within that CE. We're at roughly 1,700 right now. There's a lot of thin units that will be going out and ground truthing, and a lot of plantation thinning work. And the goal is pretty much to, prep everything or move everything to a condition that could be underburned in the future as the maintenance or follow-up treatments to keep those strategic fuel breaks open. We're going to include a few of the campgrounds in the area. Also, it looks like a couple of the boat-in campgrounds on Bowerman Ridge. I think we're going to try and do some thinning there, and then possibly Alpine and Hayward too. Yeah, so we're doing the third-party NEPA for the federal portion, and that'll be tying together the cooperative fuel break plan that the Forest Service and SPI kind of put together. And I'm new to this plan and to the NEPA process, so I'm not sure how much input you folks in Trinity Center had, but I'd like to talk with you going forward here soon to make sure that any concerns or suggestions you guys have get included into that project. So if I could get your contact information later, I'll definitely shoot some potential maps out to you and show you what we have going on to this point.
Yeah, I'll put my contact information in the chat, because we've asked several times to be included in the planning process and just to see what you guys are doing and communicate to the community what's going on. So yeah, I'd love to see some maps and kind of provide some input. When you mentioned Alpine, just so you know, Keith is going to start laughing here. We're submitting a rack project to try to remove the brush along the side of 35N 14Y, which goes from the end of Guy Covington Drive to the Alpine View Campground and the Bowerman Boat Ramp. It's kind of a one-lane road right now because the brush is encroaching. And so that might be something that you could fold in. I'm not sure if it's going to fly as a rack project. Trying to figure out what our options are as far as mechanized equipment to get rid of that. Just tons of cyanosis. It's beautiful to drive down in the summer, but it's in the way.
Yeah, could you repeat that road designator again for me? 35N
14Y. It's essentially the end of Guy Covington Drive, where the county maintenance ends.
Okay.
Going down to Bowerman Boat Ramp and Alpine View Campground.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not terribly familiar with the area, but I'm going to try and cover as many of the project units as I can in the next few weeks before the weather gets too bad. So just to find out what kind of prescriptions we can put where, and what kind of potential impacts those will cause for the mitigations and specialist reports to be written subsequent to that. So we're kind of doing the first steps here to get it going. So I'm glad you guys will be able to lend some suggestions to that.
Yeah,
And
according to
Xander,
Tara,
go ahead.
according to Tara, I guess it's just a road maintenance spec. So it didn't seem like the environmental documentation was too hard. It was just how to figure out how to get it done, which might be able to get it done before you get the whole project kind of planned out. Pat, you had something?
Yeah, I was just say, Xander, also, if you guys want to get letter of support or something from the Trinity Center Community Service Districts, which also includes the fire department, just let me know. Maybe we could arrange for you guys to give just a short presentation on the project concepts and that sort of thing, and get you a letter of support.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I'll keep you included with the draft maps that I'll be kicking out here in the next couple of weeks as I firm up my our ideas of treatments, and then we can get a presentation together for you guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Great.
Yeah,
okay.
just to add real quick, sorry, Carol, but yeah, we had a real productive meeting on Monday with the Forest Service. They're very excited about this, supportive of it. So that was a great meeting, and our rough timeline is to try to get this done by December 2022.
Okay. Yeah, definitely would like to know what you guys have in mind and hopefully provide some local input. Okay, is there anybody that I missed in terms of project reports?
I just wanted to just mention to Xander, and I think I talked to Dylan about it before, but if they need some support, you know, whether it's just groundwork, just more bodies or whatever for that Bowerman Ridge project, we have funding, our own funding that can be used to support that effort. So just reach out.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think Amelia, as usual, has some grant opportunities listed if you want to follow up on those. Besides the RAC stuff that closes on Monday. And anything else for the Fire Safety Council?
You want to close the next meeting date?
Yeah, so our next meeting is going to be December 16th, Thursday at 1 p.m. Okay, I guess I will see you all then. Thank you.